and thank you for joining us this evening for Lifetime's webinar about home studies. It's a question and answer session about home studies. Libby Murray is our organizer this evening, and my name is Kim King, and we have with us one of our social workers, Linda Rotz, who will be joining us momentarily.
Yes, thank you, Kim. And what I'm excited for is because usually this time of the month, every month, we host an open adoption Q&A, and one of the most common topics that comes up is about home studies. We usually get a lot of questions about home studies, all the way from the basics to even specific things that only apply to individuals. And so we're just excited to have someone here tonight that is familiar with home studies because she has actually completed home studies with adoptive parents, one-on-one professionally. She has expert advice, and she's part of Lifetime's team too. So it's going to be a great time to just be casual, talk about this very popular topic that is a necessity for any adoption, and we'll try and take as many questions as we can. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time on a webinar, we want to encourage your participation and invite your questions, invite your comments and feedback while we broadcast, and you can do that with the questions or chat box on your screen. And then if you're joining us by phone but you still have access to your email, you can shoot us an email. You can always email me directly, libby@lifetimeadoption.com. That's Libby @lifetimeadoption.com. And I will try and incorporate those in tonight too. So one of the great things that I think is cool about webinars is that you can ask us anything. If it's something that maybe only applies to you, we'll try and get you some information or at least direction about where you can get that information, or help you address it tomorrow or early next week with someone one-on-one at Lifetime so that you can know specifically what to expect in your goals and situation. But if it's definitely something that we know other families would wonder too, or if it wouldn't breach your privacy or something like that, then we will share as much as we can with everyone. So we really want to try and make sure that you get as much information out of tonight as possible. And Kim, before we get started, I know we have a mixed audience tonight, and there are hopeful adoptive parents in all stages of adoption planning, everywhere from just thinking about it to I am actively planning and already waiting with Lifetime. So how could someone reach out beyond this webinar and get answers they need?
Yes. Well, of course, if you are a Lifetime family currently, then you have your person who is like your primary point of contact. So of course you would send any questions that are more personal in nature to your coordinator, your social worker, whoever it may be that you know is your primary contact. Of course, if it's profile related, you'll probably send those questions or updates to your profile coordinator because that's sort of like her department. So that would be how a Lifetime family would reach us, is just through the normal channels of email or phone. But if you are new to Lifetime, of course, you can call us at 1-800-923-6784. That's one of our hotlines. As families may realize, there are many numbers that lead to Lifetime because we do have nationwide services. Another way to reach us is by contacting us through the website. You can feel free to fill out an inquiry form, type in some questions, maybe if it's not related to the topic tonight, just general adoption questions, and that email will come to us and it'll be assigned to one of the coordinators within Lifetime to start working with you one-on-one. The best way to get the ball rolling with us would be to fill out the free application on our website at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. So if you go to lifetimeadoption.com, what you'll want to do on the home page is select the center section. There's a big button there. Select the center section, and then you'll see where you can fill out Lifetime's free application, and then it'll just guide you through the process. It's pretty streamlined at this point in our existence. And then from there, we will walk you through all the steps and let you know what to expect. If you are brand new to Lifetime as well, you may not have found us on Facebook yet. I encourage you to take this evening and do so. Just go to facebook.com/open open.adoption, and wow, it's going to be like there are so many conversations going on, advice, encouragement, memes, you name it, it's on our Facebook page. That's a real great way to be a part of the group, be a part of the community, and there is insight shared from adoption professionals as well as current and past adoptive families and birth moms as well. So I think it's just a really great positive page on the internet at facebook.com/open.adoption.
And Kim, I was thinking too, since we do have a mixed audience, that I want to encourage questions of all kinds. We actually got to meet with Linda last week with just lifetime families and get to talk about things that we don't usually talk about with home studies. And so if any of you have questions even about, sort of beyond the basics, it's okay to bring that up tonight. But I know that there's so many of you on tonight that just want to start with some of the basics, because I would say honestly the home study is probably the biggest step that most people get nervous about, that they get anxious about, and so I hope that being here tonight is going to clear that up for a lot of you. So Linda, I think that we have you on. We're just so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I see a lot of good questions already.
Yes, yes. And I think we should start, Kim, I think you probably agree because we get this a lot. But we don't always get to dive into it, especially with an expert. But can we just start tonight with what is a home study?
Well, Kim, are you going to answer that, or would you like me to?
No, you are. Take it away, Linda.
So first I want to say that I know that a home study is pretty daunting to a lot of people who are doing it for the first time, but it is basically just a story about who you are and how you were raised, and what your belief systems are, and what your financial condition is, and how healthy you are. Every state has regulations as to what is to be included in a home study, but really the bottom line is it's a presentation of a story about who you are and your abilities to be able to parent a child, and that particular document becomes a legal document for the court system, and it eventually is approved by a judge in order for you to adopt. So it becomes part of your adoption paperwork. So it starts at the very beginning when you're initiating your adoption process in helping us determine your eligibility to adopt, and also your abilities to adopt certain children. In other words, there may be families that are interested in adopting extreme special needs children, and so then the home study writer will then base their home study on different criteria that the family might need to meet in order to be approved to adopt a child that's extreme special needs. So a lot of times the home studies are tailored to your preferences, and that is why we have you complete a preference worksheet. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the things that we use as a tool to do a home study as well.
Yes. And the follow-up question that we had from one of our listeners, Kayla, thank you for your questions. How do you get a home study? How do you get the ball rolling with that?
What you would need to do is contact an agency that writes home studies. There are many in every state. Sometimes licensed clinical social workers have the ability to write them, and some are social workers are able to write them, and some states require even more experienced criteria. But you can just Google home study resources, and you can find a number of agencies that will do your home study. And I would just call and see and speak to someone and see if you feel like you have a rapport with them over the phone, because you really want to have a good rapport with the person that is doing your home study. And that is for two reasons. One is because you want to be comfortable when you're having the home study done. It is not meant to show your best side. It is meant to show who you are. So a lot of times people think that they have to be, the house has to be perfect, and their family has to be perfect, and everything has to be perfect for a home study writer to come in, when it's really not that. A home study writer wants to come in and see how you really live and who you really are, so that you are matched with the right child, if that
Yes,
makes sense.
absolutely.
Okay.
That makes total sense. And I think sometimes families wonder, well, Lifetime's experienced. We've been helping adoptive families for quite a while now. Well, don't you have referrals for us? And yes, absolutely we do. Our contracted Lifetime families do have access to our home study provider referrals. But if you're not in the program yet, I can tell you a little bit about what to look for in a home study provider as it relates, kind of like in the broad spectrum nationwide. I mean, obviously different states are going to have different requirements depending on who you eventually work with toward your adoption. They may have different requirements. So what I would recommend is first deciding who's primarily going to assist you with your adoption as a whole. Is it going to be someone like Lifetime? Is it going to be a private local attorney? Is it going to be a consultant? Is it going to be, an agency somewhere else? And then find out what they recommend or who they recommend for your home study, because you want to be in sync with the person that is primarily guiding you through the whole adoption process and have the type of home study that they need for their adoptions that they complete. So what you would look for Lifetime would be, we really prefer an agency to do your home study versus a private social worker, because there are some states where maybe a birth mom's state only accepts agency home studies. And Linda, chime in at any time. You are the social worker. You are the home study provider yourself as well. But yeah, there are some states that only accept home studies from agencies. So you don't want to miss out on those birth moms. In a program like Lifetime's, where we're figuring out if we can send your profile to a specific birth mom, if her state only accepts agency home studies and you have one done by a private social worker, right off the bat, that birth mom is not going to be sent your profile. So you'd really want to have an agency do your home study if you can help it. Now, I know there are some families that live in more remote areas and maybe only a private social worker can get to them and do their home study. That is totally fine, and we understand that. But if you can help it, try and hire an agency. Another thing is find out if they're willing to send Lifetime a copy of that home study once it's completed, because as we were discussing recently, Linda, we need a copy of your home study in our hands for a variety of reasons, but it is a requirement. And some home study providers think, well, they may have a policy that they only do home studies for their families that they are pursuing adoptions for, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Linda?
Yeah, that's very true. There are a lot of agencies that do that.
Yeah, so if you're just thinking, oh, well, I'll hire this agency that's 5 miles away from me, that'll be perfect, I'll hire them to do my home study, they may be thinking, oh, great, okay, once the home study is done, now we'll start pursuing a birth mom match. And then when you say, well, now that my home study is done and I need a copy sent to Lifetime, they may go, wait a second, we don't do that. So it's a lot better for you to know that ahead of time. And the other two things I usually let families know is, like Linda said, make sure you have a good rapport, that they are in support of the adoption that you are pursuing and can help equip you for anything that may come your way with the adoption and parenting decisions you've already made, such as with your preferences. Another thing that we're big on, too, is teamwork. Here at Lifetime, you'll find we work as a team so that your adoption progress doesn't rest just on one person's shoulders. So, like, say Libby falls off the face of the planet somehow, and, she's gone for a month or something. Well, there's somebody else there to fill in and take over the reins and help families move forward with whatever, or birth moms, with whatever they need. Same should be so in your home study. If you're working with a social worker and something happens, well, what's the backup plan? If she goes on a honeymoon to Ireland for a month, like I always say, because that actually really did happen, what happens to your home study progress? So that would be kind of like what to look for if you are going to be kind of out there on your own trying to hire a home study provider. Linda, can you answer this question? Why do you need a home study?
There are several reasons that you need a home study. The first reason is because an agency or that is representing birth moms wants to make sure that you are qualified to adopt. And so the home study writer will make a recommendation on adoption when the home study is completed. Another reason for having the home study is probably one of the most important reasons is it is a court document. A judge will look at that document that is approved by a home study writer and then agree with, and maybe sometimes disagree, but most often they do agree with what the home study writer writes. And so that helps you in the adoption process. And then another important reason for the home study is when that baby is born, you may be going to a different state to pick up your baby. And your home study will need to be completed and it will need to be current. And that home study will then go to the state capitol and they will approve the baby to move into your home or move with you to your home based on what your home study looks like. And then it will also go to your state to approve that baby coming into your home in that state. So that's another important reason for the home study. And then the last reason that is important is the home study writer then does post-placement supervision. And what that means is once that baby is in your home, a judge is going to want to know how that baby is doing in your home. So the home study writer will have to validate that the baby is well taken care of. So, so those are all the reasons why the home study is important. It takes you from the beginning of the process all the way to the end of the process, and is a very important legal document.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
And yes, absolutely. And you know, the post-placement supervision, I think is kind of like often overlooked in the beginning research and may come as a surprise to adoptive parents that that's part of, like, once you complete the home study in the beginning, you're not just done with it. You know, that's not just the last time you'll ever see that social worker usually. So how are post-placement visits usually spaced out? I know you had shared this with us on the webinar that you did recently for contracted lifetime families, but what do they expect from the post-placement visits? Like, how often are they? When do those start? How long does it go on for, that type of thing?
Well, once the baby is placed in your home, most states require that a social worker go out to the home at least once a month to check on the baby and make sure the baby is well taken care of. Now, some states have a minimum of 3 months of post-placement supervision visits, and some have more. But the bottom line is that I think in every state it's a minimum of 3 months in a row that somebody needs to go out and see how things are going. It becomes part of the court document because the judge will not approve an adoption unless there is a demonstration of the ability to take care of the baby. So that's what that's for.
So should adoptive parents be worried that maybe their adoption is not going to go through? Because of a social worker coming out and visiting?
Yeah. Only if they're not able to take care of the baby.
Right.
So in most cases, that doesn't really, you know, in these situations, that really doesn't happen very often. You know, I come from a different world in the foster care world, so sometimes those are important things to look for. But in this arena, it's most often the families are very capable of taking care of the baby, and they have a good support system that will help them if there are some trying times. And the social worker is also there to help them if they're having some trying times. So the point of having a social worker is to help you be successful. It's not to, you know, it's not to pick apart anything. If a social worker comes in and sees that, you know, maybe there could be some growth in a certain area, then that's what the social worker will do. She will, or he will, make sure that the family is connected to a resource that can help them in whatever area that they may be struggling in. So it's important to remember that the social worker is there to help. And the point of the visits is to ensure the safety and well-being of the baby and to make sure that the family is able to care for the baby.
And also, I think about all the different types of adoption that exist, like international and foster adoption, where maybe there is a greater need for some assistance in helping the child assimilate. When you're adopting an older child or a child from another country, post-placement visits maybe are a little more, I don't know, would you say involved or?
They could be more involved, or say, for example, somebody adopted an extreme special needs child. For example, I had, a really good experience with a birth mom that had a baby in the neonatal unit. This baby was born at 26 weeks, and she was less than a pound. And so she was in the neonatal unit for about 4 months before the adoptive family was able to, engage with her. But the kind of tools that the social worker and myself and another social worker at the hospital, we all teamed up as a group to figure out how we could help this family ensure that they were able to take care of this very special needs baby who was going to go home with oxygen tank and require some, special assistance because they wanted to make sure that she wasn't failure to thrive. So in those circumstances, we connected them with special education classes, and we connected them in the state that they were in to special assistance as well, so that once they got there, they were already engaged. And the social worker then would be coming to the house every 2 weeks to make sure that everything was okay. But the family could call social worker at any time, if they're struggling with something. So that would be one of the reasons.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I like the picture you painted of even the social worker at the hospital, that there was a team. It's like it takes a village to make these adoptions possible, a very experienced village, that is, let alone just your normal support network from friends and family who are encouraging you and everything. Here's a question. How much a part of the home study is an assessment of the physical house? I know this is something so many families are worried about. Do you look at whether or not you have certain lead paint, stairs, swimming pool, like how does the actual home, physical house play into the home study?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, it doesn't have to be immaculately clean. It has to be a house that you live in, and you have to, the best thing is to show a social worker exactly how you live. If your dining room table is your office, then your dining room table is your office. Leave it that way. A social worker, if we're walking into like a perfect home, then we're looking like, why is this home so perfect? Nobody's home is that perfect, right? So we want to see who you are and how you live. And then another thing that is really important is safety. So if you have a pool, what things have you put in place to ensure the safety of a child? Do you have locks on the top of your doors? Do you have a little alarm when the door opens? Do you lock up your medications, or do you have them set high? Where do you keep your cleaning fluids? Those are things that most families, do anyway, but those are the things that a social worker will look at when she comes into the home. Another thing to consider is like pets. Make sure that your pets are vaccinated. It's mostly all about safety, and then what kind of support do you have? Do you have support from next door neighbors? Do you have family that lives nearby? If you don't have family that live nearby, that's fine. You may have church friends, or you may have friends that live nearby, but having some support is also important as well. So those are some of the things that we look at when we go in and inspect a home. but it certainly does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 5,000 square feet. It doesn't have to, have a bedroom for every child. Children can share bedrooms. So a lot of the things that people worry about, I'm hoping that I'm putting your mind at ease, because there are many different families out there, and a lot of times there may be, a single parent out there that's concerned that, she's a single parent and she doesn't have as much wealth as, a two-parent household, so she has a smaller house or a condo. Well, that's okay. It's about the ability to parent.
Yes. It's about the ability to parent, not that your house is white glove inspection ready or a mansion.
That's correct.
What about, I know that people always wonder, well, what if we rent? What if we live in like a section, like in a guest house in the back of someone, our parents' house right now while we're building our house? What about sort of like the little things that people wonder about because they think we're out of the ordinary? Is this going to prevent us from adopting?
Well, that's a really good question. If you're living somewhere temporary, it is important to have somewhere permanent that you are living. If you are in the process of and you're staying somewhere and your house is being built, certainly, the home study writer can go to the new place that's being built, but the home study can't be completed until the permanent residence is secured. So I see a question on there too about somebody who's moving. So this kind of leads right into that question. If you have a home study in one state and you're moving to another state, you will have to have a new home study written in the new state because it is state-based. So you will have to have a home study writer in that state, go to your new home and do a home study based on the rules and regulations and requirements of that particular state.
What about the background checks? How does that take place? Do they just run it? Do they get fingerprinted? How do those work?
Well, it depends on the state, and I'm in Florida, so what we do is we send our families to a place where they can get their hands scanned, and it runs their FBI checks, and it runs their state checks. And then you also need local checks, which usually the family can go to their local police department or sheriff's office, and they can ask for a background check on themselves, and they send that to us. There's also an abuse check that we do, and there's also a sexual abuse check. So there are a number of different background checks, and they're usually done at the very onset of a home study. And in some states, it is important to know that it takes about 30 days to get them back. Some states get them back right away, but there are some states that take up to 30 days. So it's important to know that because a home study writer can't write or start writing the study until they know that your background is acceptable based on the criteria of the state.
We had some follow-up questions when we were talking about moving. I know for military families this is a concern. I know personally a couple of adoptive parents who are living with their parents until they buy a house. They've sold their house, they're moved in with their parents. The house is totally acceptable. Are they able to get the ball rolling with their home study and get that completed and have the house where they currently live be the house in the home study, knowing that they have to get it updated once they move as long as it's within the same area?
If that's their permanent address, then that certainly could be an option. Some states require that they own the house or they rent the house themselves. But if it is declared that that is their permanent address, then you can do a home study based on that address. And if they move, then it needs to be updated.
And by permanent, I mean people who are renting may not feel like that's going to be permanent, like as in the rest of my life. I don't own this place, but I'm not planning to go anywhere. I'm renting. I'm planning to stay here, you know.
No, that's right. Now I will say that if there is somebody that, moves every 6 months, or, moves every year to a different apartment complex, that might be a little more trying as far as a home study writer approving the home study, but it doesn't mean that it can't be approved. So if that's the kind of lifestyle that you're in, then it just needs to be explained that way and why. Like if you're in the military, you can explain that. So it doesn't negate it. It doesn't mean that you'll be denied. It's just a little bit more tedious work that has to be done in order to get the approval done. But it's not horrible.
And so I think when we use the word permanent, are you meaning, tell me if this is correct or not, by permanent you mean like it's not just a hotel you're staying at. Permanent as in this is where you get your mail, this is you're on the lease, that kind of thing.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I know I've gotten lots of questions about this, and that is, before I jump into that question, Libby had done a poll for our ones who are attending online, and she asked how many of you already have a completed home study. And 32% said yes, our home study is complete. 11% are in progress. And more than half do not have their home study yet. And that's 58% have not started their home study yet, and that is totally fine. You've got to start somewhere, right, Linda?
That's right. You just have to start somewhere. Just start exploring. The home study feels like a tedious process to a lot of people. There are a lot of questions. You usually get a big packet of information that you need to complete, and there's a questionnaire about who you are. And it's really good, especially for a couple, because it really makes you think. There's a lot of questions that are asked in a home study about, what your viewpoint is on, let's say, discipline, and you may not have talked about that before. So it opens the door for good communication to happen so that you can decide, like, how do you want to, what are your views on discipline, and how do you plan on disciplining your children? A lot of people don't think about that until they have a baby. But when you're doing a home study, it's really good because there are a lot of questions that are asked that open the doors to communication with each other, and then that helps us paint a really nice picture when we're doing the home study. So the questions are important. It's important to get your background checks. It's important to have a health screening. Again, the pet vaccinations, that's important. It's important we ask references, and we'll get references through the mail, but here in Florida we call every single one. Because we get a better picture of who you are when we're talking to your friends or your family members that you've used for a reference. So it's all good. All the paperwork, there's a lot of paperwork, but once you get through that piece of it, then it's not that bad.
And you had mentioned some components of, the things that are assessed in a home study. You mentioned, I think, finances, or maybe I was thinking, what about finances? People want to know, like, well, how are my finances assessed, and what does that have to do with the home study?
The only thing that is assessed is the ability to be able to pay your bills, basically, in a nutshell. You could make, $700,000 a year and have $850,000 a year in debt, and bills, and that would be a little difficult. There might be, a training that would happen, or some budget education that might have to happen before the home study actually gets approved. But most people don't fall into that category. You just really need to demonstrate that you are able to pay your bills. So yes, there is a financial piece, and that is something that is, looked at by the court too, because they want to make sure that you are able to take care of the baby and provide for the baby and make sure that the baby is able to go to the doctor. So that financial piece, that's the reason that it's important. It's just so that to demonstrate that you can be financially stable.
Right.
It doesn't
And
matter
by
how much
financially,
it's like living within
exactly.
your means.
Right.
Yeah, living within your means. You don't have to, make a lot of money, just as long as you're able to live within your means.
Yes. So what about those who may be currently on their adoptive parents and they are currently on government assistance? Will they be able to get a home study?
If a family is on government assistance, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me.
Such as if they currently on their own qualify for government assistance, they live below what our country deems as the poverty line. Like, is that kind of like the bottom line of, like, because say someone makes $30,000 a year and they can pay all their bills and they have everything that a family would need, a roof over their head, utilities, insurance, things like that. They may be concerned, like, well, where do I fit into the picture as far as how my finances will be looked at? And maybe someone is on government assistance, for getting food and Medicaid and things like that, and they're wondering if they can get a home study.
Well, that's a really good question, and there's lots of layers to that question. I've approved home studies for relatives of children being adopted in situations like that, but not non-relatives. So it probably depends on the state that you're in, and that would be a question. I mean, if that actually happens, I would dig in. If somebody really has that problem, I would encourage them to call me, and I would do some digging as far as what the state requirements are for the state that they're in.
Yes, because, and the reason I'm asking is because sometimes we have applications come in, and as their occupation, they put down government assistance or something like that. So that's what I was wondering, well, is there a concern about the ability to get a home study? That will help me reach out to them and guide them along as to what they should expect. So
yeah, that would
if it comes up, I'll let you know.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern, and it would be something that it would be a case-by-case individual thing, and also based on what the state requirements are for the state that they live in. So that's a good question.
Another component you had mentioned is health. So adoptive parents have to get a physical, right?
Yes.
What are they looking at? I mean, what if someone has diabetes or something?
Well, it's really it's just a health physical. We don't have to know exactly what is going on as a home study writer in our state, for example. We just get a verification by the doctor that the adoptive parent is healthy enough to parent, and that the adoptive parent's health will not prevent them from being able to parent a baby. So, in other words, if there's an adoptive parent that's maybe in a wheelchair for some reason, that may not prevent them from being a good parent. Especially if they have the support of a spouse there. So it's really for those people who have a debilitating disease or a terminal illness. If the doctor says that there is a terminal illness, then we have to assess how that is going to affect a child. If an adoption happens, how's that going to affect a child to watch somebody with a terminal illness go through that, deteriorate, and then eventually pass away? So that's something that is considered, but the basics of what is provided to us is not in detail. It's just a simple, are they healthy? Are they not? Are they healthy enough to parent a child? Yes or no. It's pretty much that.
Yes. Okay, so I hope that eases a lot of families' minds who may have different things going on medically, but you're able to get around, you're able to take care of a child, change diapers, provide all the necessary care that a baby and then toddler and then older child is going to need. So hopefully that eases your mind about that. What about keeping the home study updated? I know initially the home study usually takes only a couple of months to complete for most families, but what about after that?
It's very important to keep it up to date for a couple of reasons. One is if you are in the process of searching for a baby and a situation comes up that is immediate, in other words, let's just say that a birth mom calls from a hospital, you have to have a current home study right then and there. You can't say, oh, let me just get this updated. It'll only take a couple of days. That's not going to work. They're going to go to the next one who has a current home study. So, and the reason for that is because a child cannot leave the hospital and go to their adoptive family without the home study being in the hands of the attorney and then going to the court. So, so it's very important. That's a big reason why it's important to have it current.
So what needs to be updated within, go ahead, Linda.
Really a home study update, usually for a lifetime, it is a requirement to have it updated every year. And that's because there are some states that require them to be updated every year. And there are some states that, I just got one today that gave me a 3-year home study. But we still ask for it to be updated annually because we never know from where a baby is, you know, where you're going to adopt from. So it's, the minimum is a year, so that's important to remember to have it updated every year. Your background screenings have to be updated every single year. Your health screening would have to be updated. If there were any changes in your home, let's just say that you had 2 teenagers in your home and one went away to college. That's a change. So little changes in your home life would be included in the update. They're usually not very tedious, but they're very necessary, and you should always keep your eyes out to make sure that it doesn't expire. It's a lot easier to renew a home study than do a new one.
Is there a difference between an update and a renewal, or is it the same thing?
Well, an update is just one that carries over from the one that you've had, but if one hasn't been updated in a period of time, let's just say somebody just let it expire in March, and here it is July or August, it's probably not going to be likely that a home study writer is going to want to bank off of the old home study. They're going to want to write a new one because it had been so long. So it's important to start the process before it expires.
Okay, I have another question because this actually happened with a family that they had the home study, they were in the program, and then one spouse, I believe it was a DUI. For the sake of the example, we'll just call it a DUI. What if something like that happens during their adoption process after the home study is already done? How is that, like, does that mean that they can no longer adopt? Or what would you do as a social worker in that case?
Well, it's kind of case by case. You know, if it was a first-time offense, you know, we probably couldn't do anything until we knew what the outcome was. So usually when somebody gets a DUI, they have to go to court, they have to pay restitution, or they have to do something for it. So until that's resolved, we couldn't approve anything because we don't know how it's going to be resolved. We don't know, let's just say this is their 3rd DUI and they wind up going to jail. It's just case by case. So that's a hard question to answer because you would have to know more in order to assess it.
Kim, you brought to mind, this is Libby. I do remember working one-on-one with a family who it was actually a misunderstanding. It wasn't a DUI type of situation, but it was a misunderstanding with respect to there appeared to be shoplifting involved, but in the end there wasn't shoplifting, but then there were charges pressed, and while everything was still getting sorted out, the home study provider said, until you get this off your record, because this immediately happened. I mean, this was in I forget what state they were in. Again, this goes back to what Linda was saying, the case-by-case thing. They had been approved, had clean records, and then there was this upset that came. The family had to put their plans on hold while they cleared things up, which honestly, when you think about something like that, do you really want to be juggling all the complexities of adopting at the same time you're trying to clear your husband's legal record?
Mm-hmm.
So it
Good
makes
point.
sense to put your plans
That's
on
very
hold,
true.
take care of one mess, get that going so that you can focus your attention, and they were able to adopt. So once they got that all cleared up and the misunderstanding was off its record, but if there's something more serious, I mean, every state's a little different too, and so it's probably even difficult for Linda to speak to any specific.
It's real hard.
It's
very hard to generalize.
Yeah,
it's very hard to generalize because all home studies are different. You know, they're not all the same because every household is different and every circumstance is different. And so to answer that question is very difficult. The best way to answer it is that it's case by case. But you really do, one thing for sure, it is very difficult for any home study writer to go to a judge and say, oh yeah, I know these people and this was just a mistake, so I'm going to go ahead and approve this home study anyway. And the judge then, did you see what the outcome was? Is the case closed? Have they paid restitution? What was it? What was the outcome? And the home study writer says, well, I don't know. So that's why it's important, if something like that happens, it's better to get it resolved so that the home study writer has something to go on when they're trying to approve a home study.
Mm-hmm. And I get this question a lot, Linda. Maybe you can weigh in on it. And I know every state is different. And usually when I ask this question of a social worker, they will say, it sounds to me like it may not be a problem, but I can't really for sure 100% say until I pull the records and look at it for myself. Kind of like get to know the family for myself. So every social worker has to, it's their responsibility to vet this family, and if there's something in the background, like maybe the family is like in their 40s now, but back in their college days, they had an incident. Maybe the husband was going through a rough patch and had gotten in with the wrong crowd and, had marijuana or something, and, that's on his record. And the wife is going, is that going to stop us from adopting? What do you usually, but their life is different now. They've come a long way in these last 20 years. What would you say to something like that, Linda?
Well, how about I just give you a scenario of a home study that I've worked on before. So I won't say the name of the family or anything like that, but I'll just kind of give you a scenario because it's very similar to what you're talking about.
And by the way, Linda has been working in adoption for 20 years, so it could be anyone. Go right ahead.
Yeah, it could be, and it's not. It doesn't have to be a lifetime family either.
Right.
So here's a scenario. A nice middle, I would say, aged couple, married for about 6 or 7 years now, have a beautiful home. They both have good jobs. It's both their second marriage. One of them has children, and the other one never had children, and they can't have children together, so they want to adopt. So luckily, and kudos to one of the parents, that they shared that they had an addiction problem when they were younger, when they were in college. And both of them went into, both of them had financial issues to where they experienced bankruptcy at separate times. They didn't even know each other at the time. One of them, it happened because of the addiction issue. And then, his life spiraled, and he lost his marriage and his children and his house and everything because of an addiction issue that he had. He shared that he went into rehab, and for the last 15, 16 years, he's been totally sober in recovery and has not had any relapse. And this is what he shared with me. As a social worker, I want to believe everything that he says. I believe they were genuine. I watched him with his children. I watched him with his wife. His wife said that she's never even seen, anything. He doesn't drink. He's just leads a very nice Christian life. But I don't know. I work with a lot of people in addiction, and relapse is probable. And so it sticks in the back of my mind that, gee, I don't know, he may, someday he may relapse, and how is that going to affect children? So what I did is I had him write a statement and tell me what is keeping him in recovery, and then I made them write an action plan as to if he felt like he was going to relapse, or if he did relapse, what steps were they going to take to protect the children. And they came up with a plan themselves, what they were going to do. He was going to get out of the house, not expose his children to that, go straight to a recovery source, rehab or AA or whatever he needed to do. So that seemed okay, plus he's had some history of being in recovery, so that's good. Another thing that I did was ask for reference letters from people who know him then and now. So he came up with some people that knew him, and I got letters, and I spoke to all of them. And so with all of that information, I'm able to say with reverence that it would be okay. This person has led a very good life. He's got 2 great children. They adore him. He doesn't drink. I verified that with other people. And even one of the sources that he gave me to contact, they never even knew that he had an addiction issue. So he disclosed that information to somebody that never knew that before, in order for me to get a good reference to. So, I mean, you just got to do some more research. And if I were to find out that, some reference said, oh, no, he relapses every couple of years, I might have had a different outcome. But in this particular case, I was able to approve the home study, and the judge agreed, and they were able to adopt.
That is, I think, very comforting to many families that are on the phone or on the webinar tonight. We're not on the teleconference. That was 10 years ago. This is the webinar. But those may be on the phone, too. Go ahead.
I think a lot of people make mistakes, especially when they're young. A lot of people do silly things when they're in college. And that doesn't make them bad people now. A lot of people learn from their mistakes. But it is up to the social worker to assess that.
Well, so it sounds to me like what you were looking for with him would be a pattern of a healthy life.
A pattern of a healthy life, right. Yes. And validation, and demonstration. So, you have to.
Well, in all of this,
he can say that he's doing that, but we need to see that he's really doing that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I was just going to say, Linda, you've also worked one-on-one with birth mothers, and a lot of people on the call tonight probably at one point either have thought themselves or had someone ask them, well, why do you have to go through so much to bring a child into your home when there's just women out there who can't even provide, and they're even looking for people to raise their babies? And you have to also think about a home study from the perspective of these birth mothers. And if your life is unstable, she's not going to feel secure in choosing a family who's in as uncertain a situation as she's in.
That's very true. Why would I put my baby in a home that is struggling with the same issues that I'm struggling with?
Right. And so a home study is reassuring her. I love when these women call, and it's often even in their first or second conversation with us that they are saying, how do I know this family is who they say they are? How do I know that they're stable? And that we talk about what a home study is, and they're often in awe. Wow, they took the time to go through that process. So you being home study ready is a plus when you're being presented to these birth mothers who are going to choose you, because you're reassuring her that it's not about my pride. I'm not judging whether or not I'm a better parent or you're a better parent. It's not about that. It's about reassuring her our life is in order, such that the state has even said they are deemed qualified to bring a child into their home. And that you're showing her, I've put forward this effort, and it's meaningful to her. So don't undervalue the work and the effort and the time and the resources, the sweat that goes into completing a home study and keeping it current, because these birth mothers are counting on it too. It's not just about your legal right to adopt. It's also about these birth moms having the confidence in you, knowing they've done everything they can, and I'm choosing a safe, qualified family. Linda, I would love for you even to just speak to the point that a home study is not just about your personal background, but it's also about preparing you moving forward. And what are some of the things, like the classes or the things that happen in your home study that actually prepare you for parenthood?
Well, I was actually going to touch on that, so that was perfect. Many states have a requirement of a certain number of hours of education that a family would need to go through in order to adopt. Some states don't have, as strict a requirement, but let's say like in Florida, if you wanted to adopt, you have to have a certain number of hours of education on parenting. The education that they want you to have to adopt out of the foster care system would require understanding that system of care. But in the private sector, adopting privately, they don't have the same number of hours, but it looks really good. So we like to show the judge how much education that we have provided for our families. And so we provide information about certain things that are common, like understanding SIDS, or parenting classes, or fire safety, or gun safety. There's a lot of, or just putting up your medications in certain places, or just safety in the household, or having an evacuation plan in case of a fire. A lot of, again, it's the same thing. It's like a lot of things that you don't really think about, and it just makes you think about it, and it makes you have a plan for it. So that's very important, and it's important for a birth mom to know that the family is going to be able to take care of her baby. So it's nice to be able to say to her, especially for a family that has never parented before, that they've taken all the steps that they can to be good parents.
Speaking of birth moms, do birth moms view home studies?
No. They look at the profiles, but they don't look at the home studies. The home studies are really a court document that it goes to the court. They don't read the home studies at all. It is up to the way that Lifetime works. The birth mother and the adoptive family talk, and they can disclose all of the information that they want to between each other. But we do validate to the birth mother that the families are capable and screened, and they have approved home studies, so that they have peace of mind, as far as the background goes. And a lot of times, they just don't want to read a very technical, study of information about the family. They'd rather look at a profile and see, what kind of family you are, but they don't want to read all the nitty-gritty that we have to put in a home study. Kind of tedious.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. I think just knowing, I think a birth mom typically, like when I've answered on the hotline, they want to know, well, I've seen all these parents on your website. Do you do background checks on them? And so that's the type of thing that they're wondering about. And once we say yes, they all go through background checks, then they're like, okay, now moving on to my next question,
Right.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time here. I wanted to ask a quick question and then also give you the opportunity to share any last words of wisdom, of course, at least last for this webinar. But I had a question about what if a person is thinking, I have to write about my childhood growing up, and what if I didn't have the perfect childhood and things that shouldn't have happened? And how does that get addressed? Like, do I have to talk about that? How do they judge me that I might, hurt a child? How does that play into the home study, Linda?
Well, it's just important to understand the background, the family background. A lot of times there are, there are people that have had upbringings that are not the same as what they would choose. So it's a learning experience, but it's very understandable, and it's very interesting to talk to adoptive parents who have had, childhoods that they feel were so different than the way that they would raise their children. So, it's, yes, it is very important to understand the background. It is not so important to, like, if you don't have a relationship with your birth parents for some reason, that's okay. That happens. But as long as you're able to form relationships with other people, and you have, there's many reasons why you may not have, a good relationship with a birth parent, a father who left and never communicated again, a mom who, just is not doesn't communicate very much, and so you kind of lose touch. I mean, there's lots of reasons, but that doesn't mean it won't prevent you from being approved on a home study, is what I'm trying to say. It's just an understanding of your background, and then, how you're living your life now is what really matters.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So since we are at the end of our hour, do you have any last things that you wanted to share, or kind of like any advice for families who are embarking on their home study?
I touched on it a little bit, but the main thing that I just want to stress is, don't let it overwhelm you. You want to make the perfect presentation, and honestly, it's just about being yourself. And so if you look at it in those terms and just, take a deep breath and relax, just fill out the paperwork, and the home study writer will come and she'll ask you some questions and dig into your background a little bit. And there's a lot of things, there's nothing that they can't touch on. So don't be offended if there are some questions that you think, wow, why are they asking that question? Just don't be offended. Just let it happen. Answer the questions. It's all about, who you are now as a family and how you're going to raise your children. And it just don't let it seem as daunting as it looks when you get a packet of information in the mail and a list of things that you have to do. Just take it piece by piece, one at a time, check off your checklist, and get it off to the home study writer and just relax. It's usually, it's just all good.
That's a very good message. I think that's a great message to end on. Just relax. I really like that. Libby, anything else you wanted to say tonight to wrap up?
I just want to feed on that because I know it's nerve-wracking for families, and sometimes people have a reaction to postpone or procrastinate things. And if you're on the call tonight, number one, if you're on the call tonight and you are already working with Lifetime and you're listening to this stuff thinking, I still need to start my home study, please be in touch with your coordinator about your home study progress or any concerns or questions, because you need to have it. It's necessary. It's a requirement to adopt. And it breaks our hearts when we find a good opportunity for you to adopt, or a birth mother chooses you, and then we look and say, they can't legally move forward. We know their hearts are ready, but they have to say no. We don't ever want to see a family miss out. And the other side of this is, if you're currently beginning one, or you're looking at, I'm going to start one soon, the best advice I remember, Kim, was a webinar we did with Sean and Charlene, and they just talked about, we just set goals, every week we decided we're going to get this much done on our home study, and we just kept checking it off. So don't put it off because it's necessary. You know, prioritize it, but don't feel like you have to put everything in your life on hold to complete it, but within a reasonable amount of time. Because, and Linda, you might agree with this, but I have heard from most home study providers that sometimes the amount of time in which it takes to complete a home study depends a lot on the adoptive family submitting the pieces required and checking off the pieces necessary from them. So if you do everything possible and it's in your home study provider's hands, then at least you can say, I'm not the one holding this up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of it like constantly, as quick as you can, put the ball back in the social worker's court so she can take it from there and bat that ball back at you, and then it's going back and forth, and you're continuing to have that momentum. You know, like when you were talking, Libby, I was thinking of kind of like a bumper sticker saying would be, don't put it off, check it off. That would be like my mantra if I was going through it. Don't put it off, check it off. And that would be like my little chant I would say to myself. And you know yourself, if you have the tendency to procrastinate, set up safety measures so that you don't. Make this the one thing in your life that you get done on time ahead of time. One thing that I would add is just making sure that Lifetime has a copy of your home study once it's done, not assuming that your social worker has sent it over, even if they said that they have, because sometimes things get lost in the shuffle, and they may have had all the intentions in the world of sending it to us, but just didn't get around to it because they got called on an emergency case or something. So make sure that Lifetime has received it into our hands. So that we know we can check that box, yes, we have their home study, and now we can start presenting you to birth moms who require an immediate placement.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, ladies. Livy, do you want to just help us wrap it up for tonight?
Absolutely. Just keep an eye on your emails for upcoming webinars, and I just want to thank Linda for joining us tonight because again, this is probably, if there were two topics I could think of, this is probably, I wouldn't know whether to prioritize it as the number one or the number two topics that come up the most often at our Q&As. But we're just so grateful for your expertise, Linda. And thank you to everyone who just kept the questions popping, because we have
good questions, definitely good questions.
They really
and
were.
I see Libby has been communicating one-on-one with many of you tonight, so thank you, Libby, for furiously typing. Usually I'm the furiously typing person, but you were tonight, so thank you for that. And Linda, thank you so much for staying up with us late in Florida.
Oh, you're welcome.
We appreciate
no problem. Anytime. Yeah. I'm happy to do it anytime.
If any of you have feedback or questions after tonight's call, just remember that you can reach out to us. If you are already working with a coordinator at Lifetime, reach out to her. If you're not sure who to contact, you can always call 1-800-923-6784, or you can chat live at lifetimeadoption.com, or you can email adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. We would love to know just your feedback about tonight's webinar, if it was helpful, or if you have suggestions for the future topics that might be helpful to you while you prepare for your own adoption dream as well. So please stay in touch and let us know how you're doing with your research or your progress, and know that we're all here and happy to help you get in the direction that will help you meet your baby. So I hope all of you have a great night, and we will meet with you again soon. Take care, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. One. 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 One.